Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. We are back with another game review. Today I am reviewing Death Stranding 2 released on the PlayStation 5. If you enjoy the video, make sure you do like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends, and let me know what you thought of Death Stranding 2 in the comment section down below. With that being said, let's get to my review of Death Stranding 2. The first thing I do want to discuss is the landscape of Death Stranding 2. As soon as you spawn into the world, you see just how vast and expansive this world is, and it is phenomenal to look at. It is gorgeous, probably the best looking game I've ever seen in probably all of my life of gaming. I don't know how other games don't look like this, but other game companies just aren't Kojima Productions, so I have so many praises, so many kudos I want to give. I think the facial animations for the characters is spot on as well. I think I have absolutely no complaints in this regard, just because everybody looks so clean. Everybody looks almost photorealistic, and it is perfect. And you see all of the facial animations, and you see all the emotion on everybody's face. Well, apart from Sam, I feel like Norman Reedus' face is just less distinct than everybody else, but I still think he does a phenomenal job, and I really enjoyed Norman Reedus and his performance in this game. I think in terms of the world feel, I do think that this game is pretty similar to Death Stranding 1, but I do think that Death Stranding 1 was a little bit more ominous, but Death Stranding 2 definitely does its job to make you feel isolated and captivated by its mystery. Death Stranding truly immerses you in the I'm one guy traveling across all of Australia, and it really fucking works. I think to some people the pacing might feel kind of slow, and I think the game could probably be beaten in about 20 hours, but it took me 50 hours because I just love walking and driving across this map. I think the vast landscape of this world, and especially in Death Stranding 1 in my opinion, the game is just immaculate to just traverse across. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's just one of the most realistic games in terms of scenery, in terms of the environments that we're traveling to. It just looks like a real life place that I could visit for the most part, except for the places with the BTs and all that, but I think everything else looks really cool, and it really did put me in the shoes of Sam during my returning journey for Death Stranding 2. I think if you like Death Stranding's gimmick of one guy just walking, delivering goods and packages to people, you're probably going to like Death Stranding 2. The main emphasis of Death Stranding 2 is to have more vehicle travel, so if you don't like that part, then you might not like the main gimmick of Death Stranding. But for me, I really enjoyed it. I like just walking and driving and delivering things, repairing bridges, and just immersing myself in this world. And I really enjoyed it. I really like the world feel of Death Stranding because I really get immersed and I really feel like I am in the shoes of Sam Porter Bridges. I do think the landscape of Death Stranding 2 is better than Death Stranding 1. I think we just have a lot more variety of places, like we have a desert area and a savanna area, which are just cool additions. There are also different weather effects now, a lot more rainstorms, there's timefall storms, and there's so many sandstorms and other things, but I feel like these new gimmicks are just fewer and far between. There's just not enough new of the new things that they added, if that makes sense. So they show a forest fire, and I think it's so cool that they introduced this, and I thought, oh, we're gonna get more of this. Maybe we get a building that's on fire and it's inhabited by BTs, the enemy of the game, and that just never happens. There's one forest fire, you deal with it, and they never bring it back up, and I really don't understand this because they give us a specific gadget that is supposed to tackle large fires like this, and we literally only use it that one time and we never see it again. And I just think it's such a missed opportunity for this game. There is so many options in this game, and I think they played it too safe with a lot of the things that they did, specifically the environment. I think they could have done a lot of things with the wear and tear of the timefall. It should destroy your vehicle more, or like when I'm driving, the vehicle should start to degrade, the tires get worn, just things like that, and it just doesn't do it. I was really upset by this, and it just made me feel like the game just kept repeating itself and repeating itself. It showed me cool things, but didn't flesh them out in any way. And I just was a little bit disappointed by this. With that said, I do want to emphasize the game does what I ask a lot of game companies to do with their games. The game feels lived in. There are certain opportunities when you're completing bridges, when you're completing roads to connect different areas. So eventually you'll start to see other porters. You'll see other NPCs, the non-playable characters in the game. They are going out and about and making deliveries themselves, and it is so cool. You're just running into other guys, and most of the time they're carrying other goods and they offer them to you. He'll like hold them out and want you to take it from him, and it is so fucking cool. I love this, and it's just such a cute gimmick, and I really love this. I wish more game companies did this. Make your games feel lived in. That way it makes me feel so immersed in your game. And I think Death Stranding 2 does this perfectly, in my opinion. I would say that most of the game is pretty flat. So as soon as you get the truck, as soon as you get the vehicle that you're supposed to drive, it's probably going to make the game a ton easier, and you're never going to want to leave the vehicle, because we're transporting a whole bunch of material trying to repair bridges to make the game easier for ourselves. So it just makes the game so much easier, and like, why wouldn't you use it? I want to repair the bridges. I want to make things easier for myself. So it just feels less immersive than the last game. I just don't understand why the truck is so heavily emphasized. The biggest comparison to the vehicle in this game is probably Batman Arkham Knight. In Arkham Knight, there's a heavy emphasis on the Batmobile, and I really felt that when I was playing Death Stranding 2. I just was in my vehicle the whole time, just doing things, and I could leave the vehicle and walk, but I think the game would just be so much longer and pointlessly so. Like, you're giving me the gimmick of the vehicle. Why would I not use it? But I think it just needs to have more vertical ability to travel in the game, where there's certain places I shouldn't be able to take my car. But truly, there's not a single place in the game that you can't take your vehicle. There's the snowy area on the mountain. Guess what? It's pretty flat. You can just drive up it. The deserts, the dunes in the desert, you can just drive through them. It's just so easy. And I was just really bummed out by this. Maybe there's an area with extra trees that supposed to block off your vehicle. Nope, that doesn't exist. It's just all flat. And I really was disappointed by that. I think there's a strong performance by the cast in this game. I know Norman Reedus doesn't really talk that much, and a lot of people might think he is very stiff, but when I'm playing this game, I really feel like I am stepping into the shoes of Norman Reedus and his fetus. It just is so perfect, and I really enjoy playing this game as Norman Reedus, as Sam Porter Bridges. I really enjoyed it. But I think with all the new characters, I think they did a great job of introducing new characters, but just not fleshing them out in any way. Like Fragile, Rainy, Tarman, I wanted to learn more about them, and we do learn about them, but I feel like nobody got any gratification by this game. I feel like we hear their backstory when we first meet them, and then we learn pretty much nothing about them, and we don't really get any resolution to any of their storylines. They're kind of just along for the ride. They have their reason for being along for the ride, but nothing happens. Nothing becomes of them wanting to be there with us and going across this journey with us. And it just really sucks. It really is just not my favorite part of their storytelling. And I think there's a large lore that is behind the scenes of Death Stranding that we just never see or never hear about. I think one of the biggest changes I would make is somehow figuring out, maybe when we are traversing, we have some sort of gimmick where, sort of like in God of War, where Kratos, Atreus, and Mimir are just yapping in the boat all the time, talking about the universe, talking about the lore of the game. I want something like that when I'm walking across these huge landscapes. I want to just be communicating, maybe with Dollman, maybe with Tarman, somebody, just going through these experiences. Maybe there's a couple of journeys where I have to transport somebody because we need them immediately at these locations, but that just doesn't happen. I think a lot of the things that made Death Stranding 1 are just gone, but a lot of the things that made Death Stranding 1 a hindrance, like the story, like the characters, is just not fixed in Death Stranding 2. And it's just such a bummer because the game is very good and I very much enjoyed myself. But a lot of these things kind of just soured my playthrough when I was playing it because I wanted the gratification with these characters. I wanted to help them, but the game just didn't want me to. And it was really disappointing. Death Stranding also has a huge problem with jargon. Jargon is when specific words or expressions are used in a particular professional or group, and it's difficult to understand. So in terms of Death Stranding, there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of things that they mention that is so unique to their game. And if you don't understand what is happening in the game, it'll go right over your head and you will not understand what is happening in the game. And even me, who is a huge Death Stranding 1 fan, and I understand a lot of what's going on, it is very hard to grasp a lot of the things that is happening when we're talking about beach jumps, when we're talking about the beaches themselves, when we're talking about the BTs or Lou, our baby that's strapped to our chest. It just, some of the shit that they're saying, it just goes right over my head, and I am so confused. To the point where I had to watch a video after the game to like, did I understand this correctly? Did I not understand this correctly? And it's such a mind fuck sometimes, and it's very, very difficult to understand. And maybe that's my fault. They do give you options to read things, but what am I gonna do? You think I'm gonna read all of the dialogue and all the like things that you've put in the game? No, explain it to me like I am a child, please. Not like over explain, but like explain it just so it makes sense. And yeah, it bugs me. It bugs me that they do this, but I think it's part of the charm and part of the lore of the game. That's what it's supposed to do. You're supposed to relate to the world in a lot of ways, but then don't relate to it in a lot of other ways. And it's a lot, man. It's very confusing for sure. All right, let's talk about the villain of the game. So why is Higgs back? That is the biggest question in my life. Why is Higgs back? Why is it not somebody else? Why is Higgs there? I like Higgs in Death Stranding 1, and I really understand him, and I love the shtick of him in this game. Like he's got the guitar, and it looks badass, and he's just a cool character. But why is he back? Like, why isn't he the side villain or a different villain, and we get a new main villain? Because I feel like with Higgs, we went through his story. We went through everything that he had to offer. Why is he back? It just feels kind of half-assed to me, and I really didn't like this. I think Higgs is a good villain, but he was a good villain for Death Stranding 1. I think the world of Australia just doesn't make sense for him to be there. It just doesn't fit, in my opinion, and he kind of just pops up throughout the journey that you're on, and it just feels kind of phoned in my opinion. I really like Troy Baker, and I think he does a great job for sure, but it just was a huge miss for me. The enemies in the game are probably a miss for me as well. I think the BT encounters remain tense and atmospheric for sure, but it just does not feel fun anymore. It doesn't feel scary. The game doesn't feel like it did in Death Stranding 1. They give you so many better weapons, so many better gadgets. So about halfway through the game, you realize you can escape every BT encounter ever, and it's just not an issue anymore. I think the BTs in Death Stranding 1 were just so much more menacing. You were afraid when you got into a setting and you saw the BTs. When you see your little device start blinking, it just felt so much more menacing, and I just don't feel that in Death Stranding 2. And I think it's just because Sam is overpowered. He really is. There are so many more gadgets, so many more weapons, so many more everything, and it just makes it feel like Sam is just God in this game. I do think the human enemies are worse in this game as well. They occupy a lot more of the map, but they're just so easy to shoot, and they just feel like meat shields for sure. I never got killed by any of the enemies in this game, and I never got even close. I could just go in with a shotgun and just destroy any enemy base in the entire game, and it was very, very easy. And this is the same for the new enemy type that they introduced, the ghost mechs. They are so menacing and incredibly cool to look at, but they are just fodder. You just destroy them in a couple of bullets, and it just doesn't feel like Death Stranding 1 did. But even Death Stranding 1 wasn't perfect, but I think it was better than this, and I'm just very disappointed by the enemies in the game. I think the combat encounters just feel repetitive, especially over a long session. I also wanted the ability to wipe out the bases. As soon as I'm done with a place, I wipe out all the BTs, I wipe out all of the ghost mechs or the human enemies. I want the area to be clear so I can traverse through it calmly, but that's just not a feature. Everybody respawns, and it just doesn't make sense in a lore way. Overall, I was very disappointed with the enemies in Death Stranding 2, and I just wish we got a little bit more variety and just a little bit more difficulty in the game. Next, I do want to talk about the music, and I think the game does its job. I think the music does feel a little bit atmospheric, but I wish some sections did have more dynamic music cues, but it just didn't feel like I did with Death Stranding 1. I did want to just hit on the gameplay a little bit more. I think the traversal mechanic of the game of walking and driving everywhere was a fun gimmick in the first game, but I think in Death Stranding 2, I wanted it to evolve more, and I think it evolved in a branch that is too much. I think the expanded tools is a super good option for this game, but I think it's kind of gone overboard. There are too many things. There's too many ways to attack enemies, too many weapons. I think there's kind of 3 variants of every single weapon in the game, maybe even 4 for certain guns, but it just feels like too much. I think we've gone overboard on a lot of the things that made Death Stranding 1 a hindrance, and we're kind of over the top on a lot of those things now, and it just really takes me out of the game. I think the combat in the game is definitely not the focal point of Death Stranding. I think the traversal is still the primary, but I think the combat just kind of feels cumbersome. It just feels repetitive, and I just really kind of avoided any interaction that I had with the enemies. All right, now let's get to my final verdict for Death Stranding 2. Death Stranding 2 on the beach gets an 8.5 out of 10 for me. I think a lot of the game just feels like Death Stranding 1, and I think a lot of the changes they made kind of went a little bit too overboard in my opinion, and a lot of the things that struggled for Death Stranding 1 just weren't fleshed out more and did not improve in my opinion. So I think this game, as much as I enjoyed playing through it, and I think the game is fun for me because I enjoyed Death Stranding 1 so much, I think the game is still good, but I think it's less than Death Stranding 1 for me. What did you think of Death Stranding 2? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Let me know in the comment section down below. I've been Rogine. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.